Perkinson. I'm the lead pastor at South Metro Vineyard Church, where I've been for over 17 years.
Hi, I'm Katie Lafke. My family and I, my husband Dell, our sons Adam and Max attend South Metro Vineyard Church.
Hi, my name is Vino. I've been part of the South Metro Church for almost 2 years. I'm a physician by profession. I presently work as a researcher. So again, this is just my thought, my understanding of it. And remember, this information is constantly changing. So don't hold a gun to me. I'm just trying to provide the best available answers.
Well, I know that we're incredibly thankful for you and Katie and our whole council this last year of just really caring about our people and do no harm first, and doing all the precautions and procedures and also phases. And we're kind of seeing some light at the end of the tunnel now with the vaccines, and people have a lot of questions as we continue on this journey. And so I just think this is a really important conversation for people to hear the truth and reality about the vaccinations, because there's a lot of, again, misinformation that's going on out there in regards to these. So thanks for answering our questions.
One of the first questions that so many people are asking is, why has the development of these vaccines been so fast as opposed to other vaccines in our past?
Yeah, I think that is like one of the most common questions that I have been receiving. So let me see if I could kind of share my background. Okay, so can you see my screen? So this is just a quick slide presentation that I pulled out. I'll also definitely share the link. Before I just go into explaining that, I want to make one thing very clear. Anything that goes into our body can be a risk, right? Like three of us can have like same piece of Granny Smith apple, and we might have various degrees of reaction. So that is something that we always have to keep in mind, right? Whenever we talk about safety, there is varied degrees of risk. With that, specifically, we are talking about this vaccine and how fast it was developed. Something that I would challenge us to kind of understand is, it was not the length of the vaccine process that was changed, but it was the speed of how fast we were able to go through that. So if you kind of look at this slide, I know it's a little bit small. I'll try to expand it a little bit. Usually a vaccine process goes through multiple phases, but because of this pandemic, what we were able to do in the research area was kind of condense how it was done so that things happen parallelly. So for me, there are a few factors that contributed to this speedy vaccine production, and that is science and technology, finances, regulation, and resources. And specifically, if we are talking about science and technology, what we have to consider is, with where we are presently with technology, we were able to do things so much faster than what could have been done previously. For example, when this virus was identified in early 2020, by April 15th, we were able to do a genome sequencing of the virus. And I think that was a huge factor that contributed to the production of the vaccine. Additionally, as far as technology goes, it's like building a new model of a phone. You didn't go back to a rotary phone and start building a new smartphone, right? We were able to piggyback on technology that was existing to move it forward. So I think that was another part that speeded up that. Another thing is finance. Always, whenever there is something that has to be produced or manufactured, finance plays a huge role. And usually in a vaccine trial or any kind of clinical trial, you have to finish phase 1, get funding for the next phase, finish phase 2, get funding for the next phase, finish phase 3, then go to manufacturing. And if you kind of see this quick diagram, we were able to get funding for the production of the vaccine at the very beginning. And that's where the governments were able to come together, work with these pharma companies to say, hey, this is very much needed. So we need to get to that end product as soon as possible. And that goes to regulation. So because these people were able to work together, even regulations that usually had to get cut off were speeded through. And I think the final part that we don't understand is during a pandemic, resources become a little bit more readily available. I can share, we have been in multiple clinical trials and been on the top tier of clinical trial recruitments. I have another clinical trial that I've been working on for 2 years. We have been a top enroller, and the number is 25 patients that we enrolled in 2 years. When we did the vaccine trial, when we broadcasted, hey, we are opening for the trial, I kid you not, and this was one of the hardest things that we had to manage, within 2 days, we had 5,000 people wanting to enroll in the trial. That makes a significant difference to be able to get to those large numbers. And I think all of that went together to contribute to kind of that speedy vaccine production of bringing it out. So I would want you to think of it this way, right? Say if you have to go from here, Burnsville to like Coon Rapids, right? If I'm to drive my Prius, it's going to take me about 35, 40 minutes, right? But if the police is going to help me, if I'm going to get a really good car and I'm going to get Michael Schumacher to drive it, and all the regulations are going to help me, I can get there in 10 minutes, right? So the length from here to Coon Rapids did not change. It was how fast I was able to get to that process. And I know this is a big topic, so I just want to touch on the basics, but I'm definitely open to involving other people and making a larger video. Was that helpful, guys? Any questions?
No, I think it's very helpful. Even your description of in walking through all those steps, because so many people are skeptical, right?
Right.
About how quickly, and have a lot of questions and wonder how safe it is.
And that I think is a very valid concern, because if you're going, if you have this information out there that a vaccine takes 10 years on average, and suddenly something was produced in 1 year, you're going to be skeptical. Hey, did you make it with plastic and styrofoam? Get what I mean? So yeah, it's a valid concern, and I think the more that we can address that, I think that's really helpful. So yep.
In that vein, Vino, I've had people ask questions with regard to, well, how could we possibly evaluate long-term effects? Can you talk about how quickly typical effects from vaccines happen?
Yeah. So see, again, this is a very new virus, right? This is like, we are studying it. It's a novice virus. So it's very hard for me to tell what's going to be the reaction in 2 years, because we haven't been with that for 2 years. So that's kind of like a hard thing. So it's going to be a big unknown. But I think the positive that we can take from is, whenever there is a vaccine or any kind of a drug reaction in the body, 90% of the cases, the severe reactions happens within a 45-day period. That is like, if it doesn't happen in 45 period, it's very rare that will happen thereafter. So that is definitely the positive that we can take. But the long-term effect on, what might be the adverse reaction long-term to the vaccine, we still are not known. And also it's an unknown on how long would that immunity last, because we have not traveled that age. For a HIV vaccine or a polio vaccine, we can say that because we have years and years of data that we can piggyback on. Right now, we don't have that. So that would be my short answer to that, Katie.
You just led into another question too. Will there be, and how will follow-up for people who've had these vaccines be gathered?
Mm-hmm. So there are multiple channels of gathering vaccine and vaccine data. The primary systemic federal one is something called vSafe. It is a database that has been put by the federal system. So anyone that takes a vaccine goes and reports on that. It's a very easy way. They send a text number, and it'll give a link, and you just answer that. Or if you do not have that, people will kind of call and get that. So you are going to be monitored. Some hospital systems are having their local and statewide database as well, but everything will kind of flow into vSafe. And vSafe is not a new thing. People are thinking it's built newly. No, this is kind of piggybacking on whenever you had kid vaccinations, it goes into a central database. So it's an expansion of that. So vSafe is basically Vaccine Safe, a database where people will be followed up. And that's where lots of those symptoms, like large number of systemic and local symptoms, will be documented to see how the population is reacting. Because remember, it's also important to realize, depending on demographics and types of people, populations, people react differently. For example, African American people do not have sickle cell anemia. It's hereditary. It's biological. So capturing that is very important for the medical industry to understand how different reactions work.
You described the follow-up. Is that regardless of which vaccine
Mhm.
we get?
Yes. So it does not matter which vaccine you get. We say, or whatever follow-up system that's put in place will follow that person initially for, if it's the 2 dose, they will follow up after the first dose and the second dose for X number of times, sometimes daily, and thereafter every month, every few weeks. So yeah, that will continue to be followed up.
So once you get the vaccine, how long does it take? Just because I know some people who are doctors that had some vaccines, they're kind of walking around now like they're immortal and that they no longer need to take precautions,
Yeah.
And like, well, once you get the vaccine, like how long is it before, you have immunity? And then I've just been reading some articles about, people should continue to take precautions even after vaccination, right?
Yes.
I mean, they
So
should still, yeah.
oh, definitely. So let me address the two parts to it. I think number one, when do you get kind of full immunity? So we have few doses of vaccines. We have a few types of vaccines. Number one is the Pfizer and Moderna, where it's 2 doses. So the reason why some vaccines have 2 doses is one is a priming, one is the main dose, and then is the priming dose. So like there are different studies what say like, once you get the first dose, you just get like a little bit of immunity, but it's only after the second dose and 14 days after the second dose where you get kind of the full blows antibodies that's available. And that's when I would say you are kind of immune. Again, remember, it's 94% or 90% safe, depending on what kind of a vaccine you're using. So there is still a chance that you might get COVID after the vaccine, a very slight percentage, but it's possible to get that. And that's what those percentage kind of mean. And then also, the immunity is basically for you. So after that, it's very unlikely you will get COVID. But studies are still being done. Even if you're immune, would you transmit if you get it? Get what I mean? You still can be a carrier. Get what I mean? Lots of the times, like, infectious diseases, sometimes you don't get it, but you are a carrier for someone else. So you still have to have precautive measures continued on, because you want to make sure the population is safe. Get what I mean? You want to make sure your neighbor is safe. Right now I have the vaccine, but still my wife and my kids still haven't got the vaccine. Get what I mean? So I have to make sure I'm extremely safe, because I don't want to be that carrier. So still, there are studies being done to see, once you get the immunity, would you be a transmitter or not? And those have still not come out. There's debate over that.
I was just thinking of the rollout
Yeah.
of the vaccination, and it seems like right now we're seeing the elderly population and first responders, nurses, doctors. They're the ones getting the vaccination first, and I know it also depends on how much of the vaccination that we have. Like, what are you anticipating? How will that continue? It'll just go by age
Mhm.
and people with pre-existing conditions, that sort of thing, until everybody can be vaccinated.
So there is quite a few documentations out there federally and statewide that kind of gives you the categorizations. And I think you hit a point very well. It totally is dependent on the availability. But all the communication that we have got so far is they're ramping up on the availability to various states. So, the vaccine productions as well as the delivery system has really ramped up. So we are getting more doses available, which means it's easier to roll them out. So I'll definitely in the link share out, what that schedule is for the general public, how they are tiering it out. And I think that'll be really helpful for people to, understand. And then also we are having quite a number of other vaccines that are applying for EUA, Johnson & Johnson, AstraZeneca. And these are doses that are a little bit less, you don't have to store it in a Arctic temperature and stuff like that. So with the availability of all of these vaccines coming out, I foresee this rollout becoming much more efficient and faster to the general population.
What about people who've already had COVID, Vino? Should they get vaccinated too?
Yes, yes. So remember there, when you get sick, you kind of develop some antibodies, and all the studies have shown that, that lasts a very short time, anywhere up to 2 weeks to 3 months. So I would say, it is recommended for everyone, even if you have got COVID, to get the vaccine. Usually, if you have got COVID, they tell you to wait up to 30 days, and then they kind of issue the vaccines. But it is recommended for everyone. And, that again, there is a difference between inherent immunity and then learned immunity. And learned immunity is what you get from vaccines, and that lasts longer, and it's able to prevent it for a longer duration of time.
Vino, can you briefly just give us an idea of how this works? This is not introducing a live vaccine into our, the live virus into our body.
Yeah, let me see if I can share screen really fast to understand, what kind of vaccines are available. It's also understanding a little bit on how vaccine works. And, basically, just if I'm to sum it up and simplify it as much as possible, a vaccine works by, the body recognizing the antigens that are present in the vaccine, which is kind of a part of the virus, and producing something so that it can recognize and fight against that virus if it comes. So all of these vaccines that are available is not of the virus itself. It's a particle of the virus. So it cannot cause COVID because it is not the virus. So all of it is kind of replicating a subunit or an inactivated part of the virus. The mRNA virus, the mRNA vaccine for Pfizer and Moderna, basically is the protein coded for the spike protein. And so it is created in your body, and then immunity is developed towards that. So you have different types of vaccines, and we can go into kind of a deeper dive on types of vaccines and how they respond and stuff like that. But I think the bottom line for us to understand is, it is not a vaccine. It's not the real virus that's getting into your body. It's a particle of the virus that cannot cause the disease, that the body is able to create immune response, immune cells, which are antibodies and T cells and B cells, in response if the virus comes to your body. Does that make sense?
That's very helpful.
So you mentioned getting the vaccine yourself. What would you say to people? What was it like? Did you have any side effects?
I didn't have too much of side effects. So usually with the side effects, you have two things. You have like the local side effects, and then you have the systemic side effects. I had some local side effects. There was pain. But remember, you are taking a needle to your skin. You now go and take a pin and prick yourself, you're still going to have some kind of immediate side effects. I did not have any redness or anything like that. The second time I did have a little bit more muscle pain and, a little bit of fever and stuff like that. But it was pretty much like me taking a flu shot. And I have heard the spectrum of, some people not having any effects at all. And then some people like, having a day of fever and stuff like that. But so far, we haven't heard of any major side effects. And that's another thing. Usually, if there is major side effects during the development, the whole vaccine trial is stopped and that is studied. And all of those adverse side effects that you heard on the news, those were studies. And if you go and look at what were the studies, they were usually not related to the vaccine. That's why they were reassumed and resumed. So that is kind of good to kind of note.
You've given us so many answers.
Yeah, so I'm more than happy to. I think the bottom line is there's a lot of information out there that is either of two sides, and it's just navigating and trying to find what is relevant, and make sure that we get correct information, and happy to guide that however we can.
Thank you, Vino. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much, guys.
Very much.